explore the island with the #1 engine, Thomas. Meet Handsome Hank and the lovely Flora. In the all-new Team Up with Thomas DVD, featuring never-seen-before content, and meet the engine driver, Mr. Arkwright.
Mr. Arkwright.
Go get yourself a copy of Team Up with Thomas now at your local stores.
If you grew up with the Thomas DVDs, you might remember this guy called Mr. Perkins, or Mr. Arkwright. These two were mainly on DVDs as filler, and for what they were pretty good. It's been years since I have last watched any of these segments, and I've never seen them all. So that made me wonder, what if I watched every episode of the Engine Drivers, including the YouTube stuff, and review each episode and discover the lore and story behind these segments? It's an interesting series, so let's waste no time and go to the beginning of the series.
Hello?
The Engine Driver's Locker Room, as it was first called, was introduced on May 19th in 2009. I was surprised to learn that the segment started in Season 12 and not Season 13. Mr. Arkwright would make his first ever appearance on the Team Up with Thomas DVD. Now, for those of you who know about the Engine Driver segments, you might only know about Mr. Perkins. And that's for good reason, because Mr. Arkwright only appeared in 2 DVDs. After the Team Up with Thomas DVD, he would make his final in-person appearance on the Percy and the Bandstand DVD. Mr. Arkwright only lasted for 2 months before being retired. The reason for Mr. Arkwright not being in these anymore is due to Short and Curly's, the company making these, no longer producing them, and Scruffy Dog Media would take over and do the Mr. Perkins segments. Even though Mr. Arkwright segments were short-lived, what are they like? Well, Mr. Arkwright segments are about him making a cardboard engine that Lady Hat designed and making a sandwich. These segments are carried by Mr. Arkwright's actor. He has a nice charm, and it adds so much to these. In comparison to Mr. Perkins, he doesn't have too much to him, but in these episodes, they are fun to watch, even if they are nothing too special. Mr. Arkwright never got the chance to be as iconic as Mr. Perkins, but with his limited time, he made a great impression. Except for his sandwiches. In the first episode, he makes a sandwich with bread and white cheese that we only see for a little. This has to be by far the worst sandwich ever. At that point, why not just make it a grilled cheese? It's way better. Then when he makes his sandwich in his sandwich episode, his sandwich is just bread with stinky cheese from Farmer McCool. Does he not know he can grill them? Has he ever had a grilled cheese in his life before? Surely this would be revolutionary for him. That's all I have to say about his segments, but surprisingly, Mr. Arkwright's lore does not end here. He actually appears in the Mr. Perkins segments. Mr. Perkins, the absolute legend, first appears in the Splish Splash Splosh DVD. The first thing he does is make a nice Thomas cake. It's a great introduction episode that establishes the comfort vibes that these segments will give you. Genuinely a wonderful episode.
Get back to my magazine.
Episode 4 starts off like usual. We are somehow in the engine driver common room, and Mr. Perkins is talking until he hears a parrot. The parrot messes things up, and it ends with the parrot helping Mr. Perkins with the map, somehow, so he trusts him to be alone. It's a rather boring episode, regardless of a cool parrot, but I really did enjoy the parrot. Episode 5, Mr. Perkins is apparently friends with Mr. Arkwright. He talks about how they are good friends, and he's gonna throw a surprise party for him. Apparently, Mr. Arkwright took James out for a job. Throughout the Mr. Perkins segments, we hear about all of his side quests he completes, and every little bit of lore Mr. Arkwright has, I will tell you about here. This segment is just mainly about Mr. Perkins getting stuff ready for the party. We find out he's a good artist, with this painting of James he did. Straw Hat even takes his party seriously because he calls Mr. Perkins to see how it's going. He then shows us what records are and how they work, which was probably informative to some kids watching. We also find out Mr. Arkwright likes happy fast music. We don't know how the party went, maybe Mr. Arkwright hated it, and that's why the party was never brought up again, but hopefully it went well. I mean, Mr. Arkwright deserves it. Episode 6 is all about Mr. Perkins celebrating Christmas. Kind of weird to have a Christmas episode at only episode 6, but it's nice. When carolers break into the common room, we find out Mr. Perkins is the only person in the UK to not know the words to Jingle Bells. This is also one of the few scenes where we see real people who aren't Mr. Perkins, and they never acknowledge us. So we could easily just be in Mr. Perkins in Arkwright's imaginations. Maybe the reason we don't see Arkwright anymore is because he stopped seeing us. Good for Arkwright. Sadly, Mr. Perkins has just gotten worse. Mr. Perkins finds some gifts to wrap, but they don't seem like kids' toys. He debates on calling Topham, but he doesn't. He trusts his judgment. But then he finds a box with the actual kids' toys that he didn't wrap. Apparently, Mr. Arkwright was supposed to pick up the kids, but he got stuck on Gordon's Hill because Edward popped a piston. Mr. Perkins fills in for him, and he has to wear this Santa outfit that 100% suits him. These early episodes, for some reason, really wanted kids to know about Mr. Arkwright and how he was doing. And that's something I appreciate, but I just would have never expected them to do this, so it's really interesting. Oh. Episode 7 is just Mr. Perkins building a model railroad and having a lot of fun. There's something weirdly wholesome seeing him just play with toy trains he was given to set up while talking to you. Also, Mr. Perkins says Fat Controller instead of Sir Topham Hatt. So, he might have said this before, but it's really weird. I didn't expect anyone to actually call him that. I thought that was just like a nickname and not what people actually called him. It's very interesting. Clock. Episode 8 has Mr. Perkins losing his sanity. He walks in and talks to stuff until he notices us and we have to listen to him. Apparently, he's so excited because it's his day off, which makes you wonder, why did he go to work? Oh, apparently Topham had the same question, and he just went to his office to get them things. Cool. Topham even asked him to do a favor on his day off, which... Topham, that really sucks, dude. What the heck, man? He has to wait for Henry's delivery, which shouldn't be long, but the look on his face tells me otherwise. Cut back to Mr. Perkins getting food for his picnic, and we see... a sandwich! This one has stinky cheese and tomatoes. He also doesn't like sand in his sandwich, which apparently is an important thing to know. Eventually, a delivery arrives, and he gets lemonade. Then after lemonade, Mr. Perkins gets a chair delivered. He's still waiting on Henry, but he just hasn't shown up. Eventually, it does show up, but Topham accidentally robbed Mr. Perkins' time, so for some reason Mr. Perkins has the great idea to dump the sand from Henry's delivery and make himself a beach at his work. This is really depressing. This episode is kind of the start of Mr. Perkins going insane, so I am hopeful that the next one is better for Mr. Perkins' mental health.
I saw a great big chicken.
Episode 9 is not good for Mr. Perkins' mental health. He sees a chicken in a knight in shining armor walking around, and he thinks they're real. Topham tells him he's holding a costume party in Knapford, and he gives him a chest of costumes for him to try. This episode is just mainly Mr. Perkins messing around in costumes, but we do get 2 new characters introduced, and they are Mr. Hobson and Mr. Bennett. Hobson is from the coaling plant, and Mr. Bennett we don't know yet, but they had the same outfit Mr. Perkins has. So Mr. Perkins also tries to be funny and fails. We also get Mr. Arkwright lore! He's going to go to the party as a clown, which is what Mr. Perkins was planning on doing, so he can't do that anymore. The episode ends with him going as Topham, which is actually really funny and fun. I really liked this episode.
Oh dear.
Episode 10 has Mr. Perkins get ready for a talent show. He plays the piano and the station master next door calls and says, "Hey, shut up, dude, you're too loud." He tries tap dancing, but it doesn't work. He tries juggling, but it doesn't work. We also find out he has canonically met Mr. Bubbles, which is really funny. The episode ends with him telling Topham he's not good at anything, which Topham replies, "Well, you're good at your job." And the episode ends. Okay, surely Mr. Perkins had some hidden talent. I mean, he made a pretty good painting, so he could have not done that? I don't know. Episode 11 is all about Mr. Perkins and other engine drivers. We get the legend Mr. Arkwright, who's apparently a musician, and Mr. Roberts, who is too. The engine drivers trio is going to be playing together. Hey, wait a minute. Why did Mr. Perkins play something for the previous episode? Like, he wasn't going to piano, but why not play the instrument you're actually good at? Mr. Arkwright calls Mr. Perkins and he tells him that he and Roberts are running late in to set up the instruments. So he does, and we find out that he plays the drums. Mr. Arkwright calls again and tells him that he and Roberts have more work to do because of confusion and delay. He tells Topham that and he just says, "I don't care, do it anyway." So naturally he becomes a one-man band. Mr. Perkins might be the most overworked engine driver in the strangest ways.
There's no coal.
You won't believe this, everybody. We're halfway through the original series. Anyway, episode 12 isn't that interesting. Mr. Perkins runs out of coal and he gets cold. He calls Mr. Hobson, a character I didn't think would return again. The episode ends with Thomas giving Mr. Perkins coal and saving his life, which is a rather standard episode by engine driver standards.
Ugh.
Episode 13 has Mr. Perkins excited about the magician coming over to perform at the engine driver's common room. Even Mr. Arkwright is hyped for this. The station master calls Perkins and is like, "Can I bring Mr. Bennett from the logging station over to see this act? It's gonna go crazy." It's nice to know where Mr. Bennett works, I guess. Mr. Perkins is in charge of setting things up before the magician comes over, and they said it shouldn't be hard trusting him, but he only has 3 chairs, so you know. Maybe you shouldn't have had Perkins set it up. He has a normal chair, a tiny stool, and his beach chair from episode 8. That is not enough chairs. So many people will be standing. Topham Hatt even calls and he says he's coming over there. And then he calls back and tells Perkins the magician is stuck in the mainland, and he says that Mr. Perkins has to do it and learn some magic tricks. I used to think Topham loved Perkins and trusted him, but now I think he knows that he can make him do anything he wants and he will deliver. Everyone arrives except for Mr. Arkwright unless he's filming the thing or he's just out of frame. And we see Mr. Perkins absolutely put on the worst magic show of all time. And wait, is that live action Sir Topham Hatt? Live action Topham is real?
Oh, I can't see it. Mind you, I can't see anything under here.
Episode 14, Mr. Perkins just cleans. It really feels like they ran out of ideas for this one.
What's happened here?
Episode 15 has Mr. Perkins with some carrots. Apparently he wants his carrots to be the biggest so he can win a competition. Even Mr. Arkwright is competing, and he has some lettuce. Perkins tries to get the carrots to grow in multiple ways. My favorite being singing the Thomas theme, which is the words grow. He gets a big carrot and wins a trophy, and he gets emotional about it. This episode is also one where he baked the Thomas carrot cake. Mr. Perkins made this, which makes me wonder, why didn't he bake something for the talent show? This episode wasn't particularly good for Mr. Perkins' mental health, and I feel he went a little insane trying to get his carrots to grow. Overall, it's a really boring episode, sadly, and I'm starting to feel the charm of the series kinda wear off, which makes me a little bit upset, but hey, it's alright. It's not the worst thing ever. Episode 16 has Mr. Perkins wanting to make the common room be more colorful. He debates about putting the paintings on the wall, and now I wonder if he's the only one to go into the common room regularly. It's probably just his office at this point. I like to think that the other engine drivers warn each other about the Perkins office. I could see nobody wanting to talk to him. He has this imaginary friend. Even if he's a nice guy, it's still kinda weird. He decides to paint a painting, and he says he's a good painter so he won't spill a drop, to immediately spill a drop of paint. 3 times on the painting. This episode has the 3 strikes formula in it. Well, kinda. Mr. Perkins messed up his painting 3 times, but decided he can make it look good. He makes a picture of James that genuinely makes the common room look really nice. I hope it stays in the other episodes. The painting is gone. Thanks, episode 17. This is the only episode that Mr. Perkins leaves. Just kidding, of course he can't do that. Topham has a new job for him and is really early, so Perkins decided to sleep in the common room. The station master really helped him out here, getting him a bed and PJs. Here's a picture of the station master, and I just want you to know that whenever you see him, he's generally a cool guy, and his office is next to Mr. Perkins, so that must be really interesting for him. Perkins struggles to sleep because he's so excited about sleeping at work. He must have no life. He reads some books, but gets too invested, but then he falls asleep at the end of the episode. These feel like they're going on for way too long. Luckily, there are only 5 more episodes of the series. These segments are, funny enough, better than the episodes they were packaged with. At this point, that's kinda getting sad though. Episode 18 has Perkins go get his normal clothes, but what? That's not Perkins' normal clothes! Apparently Perkins is gonna be a pirate for some kids, and Topham calls and says, hey, make sure the gold coins are in the chest. When Perkins tells him that they aren't, Topham reveals that he hid the gold coins around the common room, so that way Perkins could be a good enough help with the kids with their treasure hunt. I like to think that Topham had a fun day hiding all those coins and wanted to have a fun game with Perkins, which makes me reconsider Topham being the main villain of the series since he's being nice, but it doesn't happen too often, but maybe Topham will redeem himself, I don't know. Perkins does eventually find all the gold coins, and we get to see him in his pirate outfit, and I love it. Episode 19, Perkins has to organize a jumble sale. Mr. Arkwright even donates some of his stuff to it. He really be completing all those side quests. Topham calls Perkins and asks him if he can go find a book for him. He says he can't because it's messy, and Topham tells him to clean it up. Once he does, he says the book is a present for Perkins. It's moments like this where I think Topham is going to be a jerk, but he's actually really nice to Perkins. Anyway, the episode is just okay, not really that great. Episode 20 has to be my favorite episode in a while. So you take Mr. Perkins, a person who is fun and a functional adult, but he's kind of stupid and weird, and you pair him with a new engine driver who is a man who acts like a 5-year-old. Meet Archie. He's the reason we know Mr. Perkins' name is Gilbert, and he has become my favorite character in the series. Throughout the episode, Archie messes things up. Archie doesn't know what a radio is, so naturally he kinda breaks it. Archie doesn't know how to read or hold a map, which makes Perkins lose all faith in helping prepare him to be a driver. This also made me lose faith in liking this character, but on rewatches, I did love Archie. And this whole time, Archie is just having the best day of his life. He lives to mess with people, and while he has the mind of a literal child, he has to be by far the second smartest character in the series, which isn't saying much. He flat out knows random facts about the engines, and knows what he's doing. Sadly though, Archie isn't mentally sane enough to not see us. Just like Perkins and Arkwright, he has gotten sane and sees us when we get to talk to him. This episode was so much fun in comparison to the boring episodes we have gotten recently, and I wish Archie came back. He was just so much fun, and the scene where they chase each other in a circle was where I kinda lost faith in the episode being good, but thankfully it ended up being funny.
Oh!
Episode 21 has Mr. Perkins going to a soccer match, where the steam engine and diesel engine drivers are going to have a game against each other. Mr. Arkwright is apparently the referee for the game. I'm so glad he's 100%ing the game, but he sadly can't make it, so Perkins has to do it. He gets ready for the game. He comes back from the game and, what happened to him? Did they freaking run him over? He was just a referee. He should have not been beat up. Maybe they got mad Mr. Arkwright wasn't there that year, and this is where they just freaking beat him up. This episode is actually pretty funny, and it feels like for these final episodes, you want to make them good and not progressively get worse like they had been getting. Oh yeah, the steam engine drivers won, by the way. It'd been funny if Perkins came back and was like, yeah, the diesel engine drivers won and they beat me up. But sadly we didn't get that. Sad. Oh! Episode 22, the finale of the engine driver segments before Mattel took it over. And it's Mr. Perkins clowns around. Apparently Perkins is trusted enough to take care of Topham's grandkids. He and Thomas took them somewhere and he can't stop laughing at this thing that Thomas did with his whistle. So Perkins has to be funny enough for Topham's grandkids for his final job of the day and final job of the series. He just didn't know it. Perkins gets upset because he can't be funny enough for Topham's grandchildren. He tries everything he can think of, even that clown outfit that he has. The episode ends with Perkins putting on his hat full of glitter, standing in a bucket, and accidentally having a tomato on his nose. And it's so funny to him, he can't stop laughing. And that is the finale of the engine driver segments. Okay, so you know those, like, final line videos? Well, for Mr. Perkins, it's literally just him in a clown outfit laughing, and I find that really funny. Clearly that wasn't meant to be a finale, but I'm glad it ended. This really couldn't have gone on for more than it did, and still be as charming. This overall was such a fun series that was more entertaining than the episodes on the DVDs. Hit Entertainment was smart to keep these going for as long as they did. And when Mattel bought Hit, they didn't just end these, they kept them going, but in a different way. We get introduced to Mr. Edward's Signalbox. This is the third location in the series. This series was made for YouTube, and I think some Mattel Thomas DVDs. Unlike the driver segments, having their own lore and story, Mattel had Perkins read some Thomas stories from the Railway series. They changed and modified some of the original illustrations to match with the TV series, like making Sir Handle blue and not red. They also gave us more of the illustration. Here's the original one, and then here's the one they edited for YouTube. As you can see, we have so much more of the actual picture in this shot. It's really cool. These are a nice way to experience these stories again. And the color changes look really nice. We even get some Railway series exclusive stories like Gordon Goes Foreign.
Oh, I've got fish and chips.
I think I prefer the Signalbox as a location. Having windows to see light in the world, it makes it feel so much more welcoming and comfortable. Now when it comes to the lore, we don't get too much, but we do get more sandwiches, which is always nice, and it turns out Mr. Perkins is married? We got Mrs. Perkins now, let's go! That's kinda it though. The Mattel era for Mr. Perkins was a nice change and a great update to these segments. When Ben Foster passed, Mr. Perkins as a character was retired, and for one last go at the series, we would get Mr. Evans.
Oops.
Mr. Evans, I think, might be my favorite engine driver series. The keyword is series and not driver. Mr. Evans is played by
Mark Morgan.
Having the actual narrator play the engine driver was a great move. I love hearing his impressions for a lot of the characters. It's so charming. Something else I like is the visuals. They filmed a lot of the footage at the MZ in Bolton Abbey Steam Railway in the UK. Getting to see Beatrice, a real steam locomotive, in this series makes me so happy. I wonder why it took this long for a steam engine to be in the intro. Mr. Evans even says that Beatrice is their engine, and I find that really fun. Mr. Evans says he works here, and I like the idea of focusing on an engine driver who isn't on Sodor, but, maybe was at one point. That part's just a headcanon though. These episodes were released in 2020, and these all came out one day after each other. They only skipped 2 days in total. I don't know how many kids were Engine Driver segment fans, but this must have been amazing for some kid out there. Every single Engine Driver episode has a formula that follows. Usually makes the drivers feel extra goofy or insane when they talk to the audience because you can tell it's all a formula. Mr. Evans is no different, but they change things up per episode. It starts with an introduction of who he is. Then he will say hello, and then he'll read you a book, and we get this craft to do at the end of the episode. The way they change it up is when Mr. Evans first sees us. When we get to Mr. Evans' office before him, he is surprised, but when it happens all the time, it's weird to not say anything, so he just acknowledges it. In the third episode, when he says,
Oh, you got here before me, as usual.
I laughed out loud because finally, someone is acknowledging it. I like how Mr. Evans is so casual when he notices us too. I always got the impression that we were jump scaring Mr. Perkins every time he saw us, but Mr. Evans knows what to expect by now. For the characters in Mr. Evans' universe, we don't have too many, but we got Mr. Stamp the postman, Mr. Lee, his friend, and Mrs. Evans. I was shocked that Topham never appeared in this series, but it makes sense. He isn't a Sodor engine driver, and I really like that he isn't connected to Sodor. We do get a beautiful Topham figure on Mr. Evans' desk though, and clearly Mr. Evans is a fan. His office is a great setting, by the way. It feels like a genuine office, but one that is welcoming, and not like one of those corporate ones where everything looks the same. I like seeing the books on the side, and I love the 2 phones gag they play with each episode. I also enjoy the crafts at the end of each episode. While it gives me Troom PTSD, it does make this one stand out some. It reminds me of when Mr. Arkwright made that cardboard Thomas. And in an episode where they showed a Thomas cake as a craft, I was genuinely shocked. This is just like Mr. Perkins' first episode. Maybe these are references. I mean, both engine drivers having things that they've done in the past be referenced here for the finale of the series would be so fitting. They even have a freaking sandwich that I don't know what it's like because it's wrapped in tinfoil. The final episode of the series is not a good finale. I mean, did you expect one to be good? We have never gotten a proper finale and probably never will. But it is a great episode, and I don't mind anything's on it. Well, that was fun looking back at this series, but there is one last thing I want to talk about. Why is it that the engine drivers make the worst sandwiches ever? I guess Mr. Evans gets a pass since we have no idea what his sandwich was like, but the other two do not get that luxury. Mr. Arkwright has 2 sandwiches. It's like he wanted to make a grilled cheese but was never taught how to use heat. All he has on these sandwiches is cheese. It's white cheese and stinky orange cheese. Could he have not put one other thing on this sandwich? Genuine question, when's the last time you saw an oven in Thomas? I know for Mr. Arkwright, it's been forever. Mr. Perkins has 3 sandwiches, but one is unknown. He has his first sandwich, which is a tomato and stinky cheese sandwich, which is a huge improvement compared to Mr. Arkwright and his bland sandwiches. But then in the Mattel stuff, Perkins makes himself a cheese and pickle sandwich, but instead of cutting up the pickles, he just puts the whole pickles in there? Is he that lazy to cut those up? Maybe he was in a hurry that morning? Then we have the mystery sandwich made by Mrs. Perkins that we don't get a good enough look at. So we got all of these sandwiches here. But how do we know which one's the best sandwich? Well, sadly, we'll never know the mystery sandwich and Mr. Evans sandwich, but for the ones that we do know about, I decided to make all the sandwiches in real life, except for the tomato one, because I didn't know about it at the time, and rank them. In last place has to be the cheese and pickle sandwich. I personally do not like pickles, so I'm super biased here. Next is Mr. Arkwright's stinky cheese sandwich, because it's so freaking bland, and the best one has to be Mr. Arkwright's white cheese sandwich, which also is so friggin' bland. And the best one would have been that tomato one, but I didn't know about it at the time, so I didn't make it for this ranking. That is the Sandwich lore and the end of this video. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I'm so glad I got to look back on the engine drivers lore twice. Go watch my other videos now. I really want to hit 10K if possible, so make sure you smash the subscribe button. I'm gonna stop being a sellout now.